For those of you who don't know me, I've been a cook. I've trained in London's kitchens. I've written a few books, but over the last year, I found myself moving in from solids into liquids, and find myself as one of the owners of Heppel Gin, which I think you might have tried today. It's quite amazing what's going on in gin. I came to the first Ginposium, and I think there was about 40 of us there, and now look, you can't get another person in the room. I'm here to talk about food and gin pairing, and it's a very kind of exciting area because the gin world is kind of bananas. I've just been given 4 gins out there. One is kind of, fudgy and vanilla-y and toffee-like, and then the one at the other end from Cotswolds, a particular favourite of mine, distiller, is really kind of like drinking grappa. So the range is becoming enormous. Food, as we get more kind of, as kind of the food craziness goes on, there's more flavours, more gins, so you can hardly kind of keep up, whereas I think 40 years ago it was simply a case of Gordon's and a piece of salmon. Now it's very different. By the way, I've made you a piece of salmon. Yes.
And you got some Heppel with it. Where have you hidden the Heppel?
Where have I hidden Heppel? You've got 2 bottles which I brought with me.
Which is where?
It's over on the right-hand side at the back. Dare I say it for any whiskey makers here too, that I think gin is taking almost a kind of a whiskey status. It's something very much kind of claimed, below Hadrian's Wall as a very kind of, and it's going bananas, and it's almost kind of taking on a kind of whiskey status, as I say, and certainly in the enormous spectrum of flavours. And a lot of very nice people working in this. I've spent my life working in food, very neurotic bunch of, shouty people. And you come into the drinks world, which is actually quite shouty, somewhere around 1-2 o'clock in the morning. But a really, really nice bunch of people. Everybody is very helpful. No one's guarded about their secrets. We had a lot of help from Sipsmith writing our business plan. In fact, we've employed their ex-head distiller, Chris Garden, who now works with us. I met Masons at a Malvern RHS flower show last weekend. Really, really nice people. And it's just a nice group to work in, very friendly. People are very free with their information, and that's something we really are into at Heppel, of telling people what they want to know. Yada, yada, yada. So it's quite hard to, I'm working off my notes, so you have to kind of bear with me as I go. I've done that bit, done that bit. Okay, good. Nick asked me to do this talk, and I was on Shepherd's Bush roundabout driving really badly, trying to light a cigarette at the time, given up since then. And put in a CD, and I got flustered, and I said, yes, of course I'll talk about gin and food, and got him off the phone. And then I thought, oh God, gin and food pairing, that's quite an odd one. And I'm not sure how much I know about it. I've just become a distiller. I'm certainly a cook. But we're not like the Turks. We don't drink raki all the way through our food. We tend not to drink spirits in this country when we're eating. In Japan, you might drink shoyu which is a kind of more alcoholic offering when you're eating, but it's not really like us to drink spirits with food. And so I thought, God, what have I done? I better start thinking about this now, despite the fact you saw me finishing my speech out there in the coffee break. Nick said, please don't go over, because you'll be keeping everybody from their G&T, which was a breath of fresh air for me. So as much as I want to say about gin and food, heckling is fine. It's quite hard to talk for half an hour. And also questions as we go, because I might kind of spark something in you. I'm going to cheat a tiny bit, which is to cover not just about food and gin, but really talk about all parts of flavour with gin. A little bit, I know you've been told about ingredients today, and I don't want to spend too much time doing it, but it's actually strangely relevant to how I feel food, how I view food, and how I view drink, and how I match things in my head. Tum-ty-tum-ty-tum. So a tiny bit about Heppel. In short, there is me, who's had training as a cook, and really that's my business, that's my job, that's where I spend all my time. Nick Strangeway, some of you might know, is probably one of the world's top 20 barmen. He'd hate to be called a mixologist. I know you know Nick, I think you know Nick then. But a proper old-fashioned barman in the truest sense. He's got a huge knowledge of drinks history. And there's kind of nothing he doesn't know, and he has an amazing capacity to look back. So he's very, very good for food pairing, because he can remind you about things that used to go on in the coaching houses in London, or things to do with the trade routes that came into London and how that affected food and where drinks came from. So he's a very wonderful person to work with. Then we've got a biochemist, Careberry. The other night I was with Walter looking at the sun going down over the Heppel Hills, and Walter and I, the two romantics in the company, had our arms over each other going, that's really beautiful. And behind we heard, that's really beautiful. And we turned round and Careberry was looking at the rotary evaporator that had just arrived. So there's the romantics and there's the nerds, and that's how we're kind of Heppel's divided. What we wanted to do was to really, the copper pot still is a wonderful piece of equipment offering very many delicious drinks and fabulous drinks. There's so many makers here that I like. I think a lot of you are here, but Oxley I think is fantastic. Cotswolds, as I say. Masons, who gave me their lovely tea gin last week. There's so much good stuff going on. But Careberry said, look, and one person I forgot to mention is Walter, who's actually owns Heppel. Heppel is a little place of 27.5 people. It was described as the other day by a barman who came up and said, it is very hard to find a wife here and Wi-Fi. And no one could have said it. No one could have said it better. But Walter actually looks after the junipers. It's his land that we're on. And so Careberry said, look, Val, you love your plants, your wild plants and stuff, and your Nick, you've got your drinks thing. But what I really want to bring into this is that we have a look about how you put flavour together, because the copper pot still is wonderful, but I want to go and look at supercritical CO2 extraction. How much was that explained to you today at all? I won't bore you to death with supercritical CO2 extraction because that's not really the point. But really what Heppel was about was to go and kind of chase flavour as much as possible and see how kind of deep we could go. It's been very complicated. We bought lots of equipment we basically didn't know how to use. And it's been a long and very frustrating process of destroying alcohol, trying to drink as much of it as we possibly can at the same time and kind of getting rid of the rest. And then finally we got to Heppel. My job is really to kind of bring an idea of ingredients into the company and to do the recipes with Nick. We do the recipes together. And really that's where my view on kind of food comes into everything. And am I racing ahead of myself and then going to be confronted with a whole load of notes that I don't know what they are? Gin, as kind of earlier, gin kind of what does it go with? There's a lot of gin-soaked salmon and gin cured this and gin cured that. Kind of things that we eat up at the distillery is Walter, I went up a few months ago and Walter said, there's too many cockerels, Val. I know you don't mind getting your hands dirty. So the next morning he came down at 7 and there was 5 dead cockerels on the table. And we made coq au vin. And it was delicious with our gin in for a very simple way that it kind of everything was from that distillery. So that's kind of one odd way that it works, because you can put all these constraints on what works and what doesn't, but we killed some cockerels and we drank the gin that we were making down the road. And in a very simple sense, that's what's really kind of opened me up to quite a lot goes with gin. But then we'll get on to slightly kind of more precise, not do's and don'ts, but things I certainly feel. So what are you kind of pairing it for? Are you pairing it for your bar? Are you pairing it for a terribly nice drinks party in the evening with martinis and little bites? Is it going to go on a tasting menu? I don't think gin is a particular... Oh, this is the salmon we've made. So this was just because I don't like gin-cured salmon. What I do like is putting the things that the salmon swims past on it. So we've got salmon in the Coquet River. They're swimming up past the junipers. They're passing underneath the pines. So there's a sense of environment. So by all means do that to your salmon, but I wouldn't necessarily pour my product on the salmon. And for those of you who are about to make gin, just here, we made a very conscious decision that we would not use our product for cooking, for the simple reason it's a premium product and we didn't think it would do it any favours. That doesn't mean to say you shouldn't use it for cooking, but it wasn't applicable in how we wanted people to see our gin. So I kind of set things up in a sense of what I refer to as bridges, or a sense of environment. And that environment, or those bridges, can be built in lots of different ways. We kind of know already that there are things that do go well with gin. If you look back to those kind of days of empire, and there's a lot of gin and tonic in India, it's kind of, you know that those curry flavours work, and quite often gin and curry is put in front of you. So there's the kind of ingredients that we already know work. There is also, most importantly, at the top when you get technical, which is the bitter, sour, the sugar, the salty, all those things. But then there's other ways that I like to think about it too. In the natural world, if a pigeon lands on your gooseberries and is pecking them off the branch in front of you, you shoot the pigeon, you pick the gooseberries and you put them on a plate. they're going to work. If you're walking home and you've got some mackerel in your hand and you pass a cobnut tree and pick a horseradish, you know that those things are going to work. So there's an environment in a bottle. And so too that can go out of the bottle into food. Quite often at Heppel, when we take people up there to get them to buy more of our product, we will give them a martini in the evening as the sun's going down over the Heppel Hills, and then we will cook half of one of the sheep that comes off the side of the hill and cover it in Douglas fir needles and juniper. Now there are those sheep barging through the juniper every day. There are those sheep in the woods scratching themselves, whatever the case may be. So the maths has been done for you. These things exist together, so put them together. If you go further afield, if you pull the focus out and you look down the road, there's Pontefract. You can then get into kind of idea of geography. Pontefract was very famous for its licorice cakes. And so then you start eating licorice with gin, or you cure your meat with licorice, but that works anyway, because we all know that there's licorice in your gin. So you can go a very long way just by matching things with whichever direction you're... am I making any sense at all?
Yeah.
Good.
There are lots of half sheep running around.
There's lots of half sheep running, 27 and a half people and a few half sheep. Heppel apparently has 27 and a half people. I don't quite know how that's possible, but that's it. It's Cotswolds here. I've just drunk one of their gins, which is aged in red wine barrels. I think it's completely delicious, but the first thing I think of isn't gin. The first thing I think of is grappa. So if I was to eat a rather kind of heavy meal of fontina cheese and whatever the case may be, or a boar stew or something, and then at the end of the meal say, actually, I don't want a grappa, I'd quite like to try that Cotswold. That would be a really, really good food pairing because it's already taken me to Italy. So there's kind of sense there. Right. In the practice of curing meat, a lot of meat uses juniper, and juniper needs to be matched up with quite punchy meats. It goes very well with pigeon. Gin and pigeon go very well. Those dark, very, very strong meats. Pheasant too, it's a white meat, but it has that kind of funkiness. But mutton, we found that there's a lot of sheep on the hill, and we were constantly serving it with some nice young lambs. And then the other day we got some mutton. The mutton was fantastic. Then I rang up Capriolas, who are some friends of mine from Dorset who make very good cured meats, and they make smoked mutton. And their smoked mutton was even more fantastic with gin. And then, so what do the sheep make after that? Well, the sheep produce a lovely sheep's curd. Well, the mutton goes all right with the gin. Let's see what the sheep's curd is like with the gin. So I've tried the sheep's curd with the gin on some sourdough toast. It's very good. Tarragon, quite nice with gin. There's lovage in our gin. So if you chop up the tarragon and the lovage and you put them on the sheep's curd, and that goes on some sourdough toast, and you can start. Do you kind of see where you're going? There's always a kind of a point of contact everywhere. How was the salmon and the sourdough? Good. I read something very bizarre the other day, that someone had said that they'd started drinking gin with their sushi. They weren't a fan of sake. I thought, what a horrible idea. But I'm going to go and immediately buy some fish and try it at home. So I ran out and I bought a very nice piece of plaice, much underrated fish, delicious eaten raw, sliced it very thinly, and made some sushi with some seaweed on it. Now I know, is it Edinburgh? There's some people who do use seaweed, maybe even in this room, in their gin. And it works really, really well. It was quite a surprise. It's helped quite a bit by the soy that's being used as well, and by the umami in the seaweed, which I imagine might have been one of the reasons that you put it in your gin. But it was actually delicious. You've got very, very clean white fish, and you've got a subtle gin. I actually did it with Heppel. Our gin is quite delicate. I probably wouldn't try it with Berry Brothers No. 3 because that's too cardamom-y, but that would be much better going and kind of nudging at the curry end of things. And it was really good. So I was quite surprised by that. In Spain, we all know that the Spanish are pouring pints of gin down their throat. I had a very nice evening in San Sebastian, but I was with a whole load of Basque separatists, so I had a very nice evening in Donostia, and it was about 3 o'clock in the morning, and we were madly drunk. In fact, I was standing on the table, And we were singing, I'd learned, I was speaking in tongues all of a sudden. We were singing Etta songs, and I picked them up very, very quickly. But there was kind of lots of meats all over the place, and we were eating a lot of chorizo, we were eating a lot of Iberico hams, and we were drinking shitloads of gin. And they went really, really well together. Now, I think, I don't remember, yeah, maybe it's because I was drunk they went so well together, but I think they went deliciously well together. So, again, that sense of kind of geography has kind of made it work. Suggestions, and then the suggestions work. I think, from that geography point of view, we're having problems with juniper in this country. Thank goodness juniper disease hasn't come knocking at Heppel's door. We're in a very kind of segregated place away from everything on its own, and long may that last. But juniper, it's a very neurotic plant, and it likes to be near water, it likes rather poor soil, it likes this and it likes that, but it's a bit of a tart of a plant. It's kind of all over the world. It's a very, very successful plant worldwide. Locally, it's quite neurotic, but worldwide, it's a widespread thing. It's pretty successful on the whole. And so therefore, for all these things that we don't know about gin matching with food, as we're getting more Chinese food, Argentinian food, places where you'll find juniper, well, that's a great starting point for any kind of chef or somebody who doesn't know what to put with their gin to kind of start thinking about it. Where does juniper exist? What am I being asked to do with it? What's the project? What else is this area famous for? And then you start to kind of build up this match. Tuna. Very good with a little bit of gin on ice and with beef tartare. Really. By the way, martini with blue cheese in it, no. There's a bit of a fad for it going on. Personally, maybe it's the blue cheese I chose. But no, not a goodie. Unless somebody only an hour before has told you it's all delicious, in which case I'm very sorry. Chopped beef, chopped raw venison, absolutely delicious, and then you can kind of carry that on to tuna fish. In the fish world, it's still got that meatiness, it can carry that punch, and so I've eaten it with Heppel gin again, very, very cold Heppel gin, and in the tuna, a tiny bit of orange and a little bit of fennel, and it was very, very nice indeed. Sheep's curd we've talked about, mutton we've talked about. Douglas fir, it's not also just about the juniper, it's of course the other things you put in it. The cardamom goes towards the curries, the fennel seeds, maybe we can take you into a world of fish. Douglas fir is a very, very interesting plant for us. We found that when we picked it, it was quite kind of sour and grapefruity. And if you dry it over the fire, it then takes on this extraordinary taste of Skittles, melted, Skittles, the sweeties. If you then put it through a rotovap, it's got a very, very... Have we given you all some Heppel gin? Yes. Another one. I don't know if you had any kind of melony taste coming off it. You find that more when you open it up with water. But if you drink the Douglas... Everything we put through the rotovap, we put through one ingredient. It's never mixed. And you get this incredibly strong taste of overripe, kind of almost on the verge of too much sun beginning to rot cantaloupe melons. Now, at the Hand and Flowers, Tom Kerridge's place, they've done a serve. They said, could we put juniper in it? I was like, well, why the hell do you want to do that? We've spent ages balancing it, and then you just go and shove a whole load of juniper in it. No, thanks. And they said, well, what can we do? And then their very clever barman, Anthony, he said, well, I'm getting a lot of melon, and so we're going to put melon in it. And they put melon balls in our gin and tonic. It's really delicious. So that, although it's been made as a drink, I know that I could go and make a really nice melon granita with some gin in it, or a melon sorbet, or whatever the case may be. Just by looking at the drinks, sometimes it gives you the food, because the barmen are really clever, and quite often they're more clever than the chefs. Look at their drinks, and then you kind of see how you can work that into food. I quite like that. That wasn't in my notes. But we've done that. Rats. I hope that's somewhere near 20 minutes, because I did want to. Full circle. I think at talking about food pairing in gin, it's not the easiest drink to pair food with, but there's a lot of clever chefs, there's a lot of clever barmen. We're all going to learn as we go on, and I think in this kind of lovely world where everyone was so generous with their information, if you're this fantastic at helping each other, then share all your ideas on food. I might be a professional cook, but I sure as hell don't know it all.